The 42nd floor of Hawthorne Tower glowed amber in the evening light. It was 7:18 on a Thursday, and Celeste Hawthorne sat alone with her father's ebony and ivory chessboard, a problem from a Capablanca study laid out before her. A soft knock interrupted her. "Come in," she said, without looking up. The man who entered wore a gray janitor's coverall and pushed a cleaning cart that barely whispered against the carpet. His eyes stopped on the board. She caught the look. She smirked. "Beat me in chess, and I'll marry you." He didn't laugh. "My name is Liam, and I play for real." He sat. 21 moves later, the ivory king lay on its side. Boardrooms had thrown her many fights. None of them had ever tipped her king like that. Before he sat, Liam looked at the board the way a doctor looks at a chart. "Queen's Gambit declined," he said. "Classical variation. You favor control over tactical complications." Something fluttered behind Celeste's sternum. Not insult. Something closer to surprise. He took the chair across from her without asking, settling into it with the small unconscious adjustment of a man who had spent thousands of hours in chairs exactly like this one. He played with the unstudied fluency of a man who had spent decades inside the 64 squares. The opening was classical, but every move carried a small private signature, an idea hiding behind an idea. He developed his pieces in textbook order, the kind of restrained beginning that looked like caution to an amateur and felt like a slowly closing fist to anyone who knew what they were watching. By the 10th move, she knew she was in trouble. She still had material parity. She still had her queen. But the squares she needed had begun to disappear one by one, the way a city shrinks when the lights go out neighborhood by neighborhood. By the 15th, she was fighting for her life on the board. Her bishop was trapped behind her own pawns. Her rook had nowhere to go. The center, which she had spent 10 moves trying to control, had quietly become his. "Check," he said, almost apologetically, a knight surfacing on a square she had not bothered to defend. She moved her king. Check. Again, this time from an angle she had not seen coming, a long bishop diagonal that had been waiting for her own move to open. Her palms went damp. She had not sweated through a chess game since her first board presentation 15 years ago, and even that had been more nerves than sweat. This was sweat. Checkmate. His voice held no triumph in it, only quiet satisfaction. The final position was tidy to the point of cruelty. Her king woven into a net of his own pieces. She tipped her king. The small ivory weight made a soft tick against the board. "You hustled me," she said. The words came out sharper than she meant. Liam was already resetting the board, each piece returning to its square with the precision of a man who had performed this ritual thousands of times, his fingers moving without him having to look. "I never said I was a random guy," he answered. "You assume that because of what I do for work, there's a difference." It landed like a slap. She had looked at his coverall and his cart and reduced him to a stereotype before he had spoken a word. The realization was uncomfortable in a way that physical pain was uncomfortable. A quiet ache she could not put down. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked. "I had some good teachers when I was younger," he said. He did not elaborate. There was no boast in the answer, only the careful brevity of a man who had learned that telling the whole truth about himself rarely went well. "Chess used to be my life." Before other things became more important, the sentence hung there, waited. Before she could pull on the thread, he stood and gripped the cart handle. "Thank you for the game, Miss Hawthorne. I have rounds to finish." She watched him push the cart out the door. The conference room shrank around her, as if his presence had been holding the corners open, and now, without him, the walls leaned in. She looked at the reset board. She did not move a piece. She did not move at all. After a long minute, she opened her phone and typed his name into a notes file, the way she once jotted down the names of competitors she intended to study. Below his name, she wrote, in a small, almost reluctant hand, the word real. She underlined it twice. She could not concentrate all week. She sat through her Monday investor call without retaining a single number. She approved an acquisition memo on Wednesday that she could not, that evening, remember the contents of. On Thursday afternoon, when Jennifer Powell reminded her that the building services contractor database needed updating, Celeste used it as cover and pulled Liam Carter's file. The basics were unremarkable. 39. Widowed. one dependent, clean record. Then the line under previous occupation made her lean back as if pushed. Professional chess player, USCF rating 2,437. She cross-referenced him against the Federation databases. The results felt like vertigo. Liam Carter had been a genuine prodigy, a teenager who had ruled the national junior circuits in the late 90s and early 2000s. International master at 16. Tournament reports from 20 years ago described him as fearless and intuitive, a tactical mind in the body of a kid who still wore his hair too long. He had been a hair from a grandmaster norm when he simply walked off the circuit. One of the old reports, written by a tournament correspondent in St. Louis, called his late middle game the most natural she had seen in a player his age since Kasparov was on the rise. On the chess forums, there were posts from 12 years back asking, in slow archaeological tones, whatever happened to that Carter kid, the one who could have been the next Fischer. Someone speculated he had moved to Europe. Someone else said he had taken a coaching job in California. Nobody guessed Boston. Nobody guessed a janitor's cart. She kept digging. A public death certificate. Sarah Elizabeth Carter, 29, breast cancer. 7 years ago. Survived by husband Liam and daughter Emma. Celeste sat with the tournament photographs glowing on her screen. The young man in them lived in a different world from the one who had pushed a cart into her conference room. That Liam Carter had drawn corporate sponsorships, magazine interviews, appearance fees that could have funded a life. He held a trophy in one of the photos, a heavy silver cup, and the smile he wore was the unguarded, slightly disbelieving smile of a kid who had not yet learned that the world could take everything back. He had traded all of it for health insurance and a steady paycheck. He had made himself invisible so his daughter could breathe. The weight of her opening contempt settled on her chest like wet wool. She had looked at his uniform and assumed his mind was smaller than hers. She had spoken her offer in front of him with the same casual cruelty she might have used in front of a piece of office furniture. She closed the laptop and sat in the silence of her office for a long time. The next evening, she planned to find him and apologize. But at 6, walking out through the parking garage, she heard a man's voice tight, with a kind of fear she had never had occasion to use. Following it, she rounded a concrete pillar and saw Liam on his knees beside a small girl. The child's lips were tinged blue, her eyes wide and searching, the eyes of someone drowning in air. Asthma. The inhaler in his hand was clearly not enough. He was talking to her in a steady, low voice, telling her that Daddy was right here, that the ambulance was coming, his face white, with the controlled panic of a parent who had been here many times and was no less terrified for the practice. Without thinking, Celeste pulled her phone. "This is Celeste Hawthorne," she said into the dispatcher's line, in the voice that had run boardrooms for 15 years. "I need an ambulance at the Hawthorne Tower garage immediately. Pediatric respiratory distress. I'm authorizing use of our company helipad if it shaves a minute." Liam looked up at her then for the first time, and what crossed his face was not gratitude. It was simpler than that. It was the recognition of someone who had decided, for reasons of her own, to stand in his corner. Boston Children's Hospital. Pediatric emergency. Celeste followed the ambulance, not because anyone had asked her to, but because leaving had become unthinkable. Her insurance authorizations and her name smoothed Emma's path through triage faster than triage was meant to move. A nurse who had seen the helicopter pad authorization on the intake sheet led them through a side corridor without asking the usual questions. Then the doors closed behind Liam and a small gurney, and Celeste, the woman who had not sat still for 3 minutes in 15 years, sat in a family lounge for 3 hours and did not check her phone once. The lounge had the particular smell that hospitals cultivate, antiseptic and old coffee, and the faint chemical sweetness of vending machine snacks that nobody really wanted. There were 2 other parents in the room, a couple who held hands without speaking. Celeste did not know what they were waiting for and did not ask. Liam reappeared at 9:47. His face was hollowed out but no longer hung with panic. Emma was stable. Nebulizer, fluids, observation. They might discharge her in the morning if her oxygen held. "Thank you," he said. He did not say more. He did not need to. They drove back to Dorchester near midnight. She did not come up. She stood at the curb and watched him carry the sleeping girl across the threshold of a small apartment, whose hallway walls were papered with crayon drawings and a calendar of medical specialists pinned with magnets. The image stayed with her on the drive home, the small, dark-haired head against his shoulder, the careful way he turned sideways to fit the door frame. The week after, they began finding excuses. She started taking coffee in the lobby during his afternoon shift, ostensibly reviewing reports, but in truth waiting for a glimpse of him as he passed through with his cart. He found reasons to clean the executive floor more often than the rotation called for. Their conversations developed the easy rhythm of two people surprised to discover they liked each other's company. They spoke about books, about the weather, about a small Vietnamese coffee shop 2 blocks from the tower that he had recommended, and she had, to her own surprise, actually visited. Jennifer noticed first. Her boss laughed in meetings, in small private laughs that were nonetheless laughs. She seemed present in conversations rather than 3 moves ahead. She left the office at 6 instead of 9, twice in 1 week, an event so unprecedented Jennifer almost emailed HR. One night, riding down in the elevator together, Celeste asked about Emma, and Liam told her, not much, but enough, about Sarah. About how Sarah had taught their daughter that winning was not the fun part. About how he kept finding the sentence in his mouth at odd times, as if it had been left there for him to chew on. Celeste, in turn, told him about her father, about how he had taught her chess at his knee, about how he had died when she was 26 and left her an empire she had not asked for and could not bring herself to lose, about how the chessboard in her office had been his, and how she had not let anyone else play on it in 9 years until him. For the first time in many years, when the elevator reached the lobby, she did not want the conversation to end. She walked him to the staff exit. She watched him swipe his badge and step out into the loading bay, and she stood there a moment longer than was reasonable, looking at the closed door. 4 weeks moved through small things. Saturday afternoons in Boston, common, Emma running between the old oaks while 2 adults walked alongside, hands not touching but trajectories parallel. A trip to the public garden to see the swan boats, where Emma held Celeste's hand on the bridge and asked, with the casual assumption of children, whether they could come back next Saturday, too. Emma began asking Liam about the pretty lady from the hospital. Children read the emotional weather of their parents better than meteorologists. And Emma had registered a new light somewhere in her father's face. On a Saturday in late September, Celeste came to the Dorchester apartment for the first time. The drive over took her through neighborhoods she had not driven through in years, neighborhoods of triple-deckers and corner stores. A part of Boston, her usual life, rarely required her to visit. Liam was making grilled cheese in the kitchen. Emma opened the door. "Hi, Miss Celeste. Daddy's making sandwiches. Want some?" There was a chess set on the kitchen table. Wooden, unremarkable, the kind of set you bought at a hobby shop for $40. It was Sarah's. He had never put it away in 7 years. Emma took Celeste's hand and dragged her to the table. "Daddy taught me some moves. Want to see?" What followed was the most important chess lesson of Celeste's adult life. Emma played with an unself-conscious joy. She broke every principle of the opening in her first 3 moves, and somehow caught the essence of the game while she was breaking them. She narrated. The pawns were brave peasants. The queen was a benevolent ruler who protected everyone. Knights had names. The bishop was someone's grandmother. The white king was a tired old man who only wanted to read his book. "You're not playing to win," Celeste said, "not as a critique. Winning's not the fun part," Emma answered, in the patient voice of a child correcting an obvious adult error. "The fun part is all the things that happen before someone wins." It struck Celeste like a small, private revelation. She had spent so many years sharpened to outcomes, quarterly results, market share, competitive advantage, that she had forgotten the texture of the experience itself. Across the table, Liam watched Celeste watching his daughter. Something in his face softened, and Celeste felt it as a temperature change in the room. She stayed for sandwiches. She stayed for a second game, in which Emma proposed that the rooks should be allowed to fly diagonally because it was Saturday. She stayed for a small bowl of strawberry ice cream that Emma scooped herself and refused all help with. When she finally left that evening, she stood in the apartment hallway for a moment with her hand on the door before she walked out. She could not remember the last time she had been reluctant to go home to her own penthouse. In the elevator on the way down, she pulled her phone out, then put it back in her bag without checking it. The number on the screen had been 17 messages. None of them, she suspected, were as important as the kitchen she had just left. In the parking lot, she sat in her car for 2 full minutes before she started the engine. It was 9:14 on a Tuesday morning when Jennifer knocked on Celeste's office door with the face of a woman walking a fuse. "Miss Hawthorne, we have a situation. There's a video circulating on the internal platform." Marcus Webb, a junior associate in accounting who had been working unusually late the week before, had posted 90 seconds of grainy phone video shot through the glass of the conference room. The audio was clear enough. The caption read, "When the CEO promises to marry the janitor if he beats her at chess and he actually does it in 3 moves, is this legally binding?" By noon, half the company had seen it. Dozens of personal accounts had shared it. By 2 in the afternoon, the video had jumped the corporate firewall and surfaced on a finance gossip site with 300,000 readers. HR fielded 17 calls before lunch. The comment thread metastasized. Speculation about her private life. Jokes about office, romance. Pointed questions about policy. A toxic blend of sexism and class condescension that flattened her into a caricature and dismissed Liam as a gold digger. Her phone rang all afternoon. Board members, business partners, a reporter from a business weekly with a polite, predatory voice. The worst of them was Richard Hawthorne, her uncle, the chairman of the board, whose disapproval carried the weight of family disappointment and fiduciary duty. "Celeste, what the hell is this nonsense about marrying the janitor? The board is concerned about your judgment." "It was a joke, Richard," she said, hating the defensive register in her own voice. A casual line caught on camera by someone with too much free time. "It doesn't look casual in the video. It looks like you're making a mockery of your position and the company's dignity. You know how a jury reads a video like that. You know how a shareholder reads it. There is no jury, Richard. Not yet." That evening, the pressure cracked. She caught Liam in the service elevator on his way down, and her composure went with the doors. Did you know that little weasel was filming us? Was this some kind of arrangement? Some way to leverage yourself into a better position?" Liam's face went carefully empty, the expression of a man who had learned to take accusations without throwing one back. "No," he said. "I didn't know anyone was filming. I don't want anything from you except your friendship, which I'm apparently about to lose." "Friendship? Is that what you call it when you humiliate someone in front of her whole company?" "I didn't humiliate you. I played chess. You let me think you were just some random man with a cart. I never let you think anything. You decided what I was the second I walked through that door." The reasonableness of his answer only fed her anger. Right, the noble janitor, too pure to take advantage of a situation. "You must be enjoying yourself." Something flickered in his eyes for the first time, a thin crack in the patience. "I'm not enjoying anything. I'm laughing at myself for thinking you were different, for believing someone who built an empire might understand what it means to sacrifice everything for the people you love." The elevator opened on the ground floor with a mechanical ding that sounded like a coffin nail. Liam walked out and didn't look back. Celeste rode the elevator back up to 42. She sat in her office until midnight. She did not turn on the light. 2 days later, Thursday, 2 in the afternoon, Celeste was in the middle of a damage control meeting when her phone vibrated. Liam. She walked out of the meeting mid-sentence. "Emma, ER again. Can you authorize the insurance one more time?" She was in her car before he had finished the sentence. "Boston Children's, pediatric ward. Emma in the bed. Oxygen mask. Impossibly small." Liam holding her hand and reading aloud from a thin chapter book while his daughter fought for breath. The tears on his face were silent and unhidden. Celeste had never seen real fear before. Not in any boardroom, not in any market collapse. This was what it looked like. This was what it cost a person to love someone more than himself. She stayed through the night. Not because anyone needed her there, but because leaving was unthinkable. She brought him coffee. She brought a blanket from the family lounge that he draped over Emma's feet. She sat in the chair against the far wall and did not speak unless he spoke first. By dawn, Emma was stable again. The nurses were moving with the easier rhythm that meant the worst had passed. In the family lounge, Liam said, in a voice scoured by exhaustion, the doctor wants to talk about more aggressive options. Specialists in another city, the kind of care that costs more than I make in 5 years. Celeste did not offer money. She had learned, in the last 2 months, that charity was the surest way to drive him further from her. Instead, she asked, "What can I do?" "Nothing," he said, without bitterness. "This isn't a problem you can fix, Celeste. Some things just are what they are." When Celeste came back to the office that morning, Jennifer was waiting at her desk with a folder. The assistant had spent the week quietly investigating, not because Celeste had asked, but because she had known her boss would need the truth. Marcus Webb had not acted alone. He had been working for Richard Hawthorne. Jennifer laid the evidence out one piece at a time. Emails from Richard's personal account to Marcus, 3 weeks before the scandal, promising a promotion to senior associate if Marcus could find something on Celeste. Schedule manipulations that had placed Marcus on the executive floors that week. A draft proxy statement leaked from a friendly counsel, showing Richard preparing a no-confidence vote in 10 days, intending to install his own son as CEO. Celeste sat very still. Her father's brother, the man who had carried a pallbearer's strap at her father's funeral, the man who had told her she could call him whenever she needed someone to lean on. He had engineered her fall. She did not drive to Richard's office. She drove to Dorchester. Liam opened the door in yesterday's shirt, Emma asleep in the back room. Celeste did not mention the scandal. She did not mention Richard. She stood at the threshold and said, "I'm sorry for what I said in the elevator, for assuming the worst about you, for being exactly the kind of person you thought I was." Liam looked at her with those gray-green eyes that saw too much. "You were scared. People say things they don't mean when they're scared. I understand that. Do you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive. You reacted the way anyone in your position would react. I just hoped you might be different." The quiet devastation in his voice was worse than anger, a recognition that she had failed to meet some standard she had not even known existed. She wanted to argue. She wanted to explain the pressures that had driven her to lash out. But all of those explanations sounded like excuses with the small, dark-haired girl breathing through a nebulizer just down the hall. She nodded once. "Okay," she said, and she went home and started writing her response. Monday, 9 in the morning, the Hawthorne boardroom, 11 members, Richard at the chairman's seat. The agenda read, "Vote of no confidence CEO, Celeste Hawthorne." Richard opened with a tone of false paternal concern. He spoke of his worry for her mental health, of behavior unbecoming of the company's dignity, of the need to act before the brand suffered further damage. He did it well. He had been doing some version of it her whole life. Celeste let him finish. Her face was calm, not the calm of the old armor, a different calm, the calm of a woman who had recently reordered what mattered. When her turn came, she did not defend the scandal. She placed Jennifer's folder on the table. "Before we vote, I want the board to know that Marcus Webb did not act independently. He was hired and directed by Richard Hawthorne to surveil me." The evidence circulated, hand to hand. Emails, bank records, personal payments from Richard's account to Marcus over the past 6 weeks. The draft proxy. The schedule, manipulations. Richard's face went red. "This is slander. This is fabricated. This is documentation. I have already forwarded a complete copy to outside counsel and to the SEC. Attempting to manipulate a board vote through a smear campaign is a breach of fiduciary duty. Conspiring to remove a sitting CEO based on falsified pretexts is a federal matter." The 7 independent directors traded looks. Margaret Chen, who had served on the board for 19 years, set her copy of the folder down with the small, definitive sound of a woman who had seen enough. The vote went 9-2. Richard Hawthorne removed as chairman, suspended from all corporate roles pending investigation. Celeste Hawthorne confirmed in her position. 2 of the directors stayed behind to shake her hand. One of them, the oldest of them, said quietly, "Your father would have done it the same way." She did not trust herself to answer. After the meeting cleared, she stayed behind, alone in the room, watching the morning light move across Boston Harbor through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She had won. She felt nothing about it. She called Liam. He didn't answer. She called again. The third time, his voice came through tired. Emma was just discharged. We're heading home. I need to see you. Not about the scandal, not about the company. About something else. A long silence. 6 o'clock. Bring something for Emma. She's been asking about you. Celeste hung up. For the first time in 15 years, she left her office before 4 in the afternoon. She drove to a small antique games shop on Newberry Street. She passed over the most expensive set on the shelves. She chose the most beautiful one, maple and walnut. Each piece carved by a hand that had loved its work. The shopkeeper wrapped it in brown paper and tied it with twine. On the way to Dorchester, she pulled into Boston Common and parked for 15 minutes. She did not cry. She just sat. A street musician was playing a slow version of a song she did not recognize, and she listened to it all the way through. 6:14. Celeste knocked on the apartment door. Emma opened it. Still pale, but bright-eyed, the small, shy smile that never failed to melt something inside Celeste's chest. "Hi, Miss Celeste. Daddy's in the kitchen making grilled cheese. Want some?" The ordinary domesticity of the scene, the father cooking, the daughter playing, the comfortable disorder of a life built on love rather than profit margins closed Celeste's throat. Liam came out of the kitchen with a questioning look. He had shaved. The shirt was clean. He had been waiting for her, however unwillingly. Emma had already taken Celeste's hand and was leading her to the table. Celeste pulled the wrapped package from her bag. The maple and walnut set glowed under the late afternoon light. "I thought Emma might like a set of her own." Emma's eyes went wide. She touched the pieces one at a time, with the reverence of someone who understood she was holding something precious. "They're so beautiful. Are they really for me? They're really for you. Even the Queen, especially the Queen." Liam watched the exchange with an expression that cycled through surprise, gratitude, and something deeper that quickened Celeste's pulse. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." She met his eyes for the first time since the hospital. "I've been thinking about what you said, about sacrifice, about what really matters. I think I've been playing the wrong game for a very long time." They talked while Emma arranged the new pieces in patterns of her own design, more concerned with how the knights faced each other than with starting positions. The conversation began carefully, both of them stepping around the recent landmines, but soon found a natural pace. Liam talked about Emma's care plan, specialists, the delicate balance between hope and the arithmetic of medical bills. Celeste opened up in ways she had not even with Jennifer, about the loneliness of being responsible for hundreds of jobs and hundreds of millions in shareholder value, about Richard and the vote, and the strange fact that during the worst of it, she had not been thinking about the company. "Are you afraid of losing your job?" Liam asked. She considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, the possibility would have ended her. Now, sitting in this apartment with the smell of grilled cheese still in the air, she found that her priorities had shifted in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I'm afraid of losing this," she said quietly, gesturing at the three of them, the lamplight, the warmth of a kitchen that had become more valuable to her than any corporate achievement. After Emma went to bed, the two of them sat at the kitchen table. Sarah's old chess set rested between them, the one Liam had not put away in 7 years. He spoke without looking up. "Sarah told me, on the last night, don't let Emma grow up with a father who disappeared from himself. I thought she meant work any job, as long as I stay in the room. I'm not sure that's what she meant." Celeste did not answer right away. She set her hand on the table, not on his, just near. He didn't move it away. Outside, a city bus passed. Inside, neither of them moved for a long time. 2 months later, they found a house in Brookline. Modest, comfortable, a yard big enough for Emma to run in, a garden where Celeste was learning to grow things other than profit margins. The house had been on the market for 9 months because the previous owners had asked too much, and Celeste, who could have written a check for it without flinching, instead let Liam do the negotiating. He brought the price down $19,000. He looked very pleased with himself for a week. Liam was working again, just not at Hawthorne Tower. He taught part-time at the Boylston Chess Club, where the older members had recognized him within 10 minutes of his first lesson and then, with the particular grace of chess people, had said nothing about it to anyone. He had started editing a beginner's book for a small publisher in Cambridge. The advance was modest. He liked the work. Emma was responding well to the new therapies. The specialists Celeste's connections had recommended were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. For the first time in many years, Liam could imagine a future that extended beyond the next medical crisis. Marcus Webb had been fired and was, according to Jennifer, applying for entry-level positions at companies that had heard of him. Richard Hawthorne was in settlement negotiations with the board, facing civil claims for breach of fiduciary duty and a separate quiet inquiry from the SEC. He had not contacted Celeste once. She had not expected him to. Celeste had restructured her schedule. She was still CEO. She was no longer the only CEO that lived inside her life. She was home by 5:30 most nights. She cooked dinner 3 times a week. Liam took 2. Takeout filled the rest. On a Sunday afternoon in late October, with red maple leaves drifting across the yard, she and Liam sat on the patio with mugs of coffee growing cold. Liam asked, in a careful voice, "Do you ever regret it? That I'm still what I used to be? What do you mean? The men you used to date, CEOs, lawyers, hedge fund partners. I'm an ex-chess player who teaches kids on Saturdays and tunes the occasional piano on the side." Celeste laughed, not at him, but at the foolishness of the question. "Liam, I dated CEOs and lawyers and hedge fund partners. None of them ever beat me in 3 moves. None of them ever sat through the night in a family lounge without checking his phone. None of them came with a daughter who taught me that winning isn't the fun part. You won," he said softly. "You kept the company. You pushed Richard out. I won the war. I didn't need to be fighting. That's not winning. That's surviving." She set her hand over his. "This is winning." Emma came running out the back door with a book under her arm. "Daddy, Miss Celeste, Miss Jennifer just called. She's going to be 10 minutes late." Jennifer came to Sunday dinner now. It had become a rule of the house, the way certain things become rules in families without anyone needing to vote on them. 4 months on. Spring. Brookline. The maple and walnut set lived on the patio table, the set Celeste had given Emma, the one all 3 of them used for Sunday matches that had quietly become a ritual. The matches were less about competition than about the pleasure of sitting together in the slanting light. Liam sat across from Celeste. His face had lost the haunted quality it had carried through the worst of Emma's episodes, replaced with something close to contentment. Celeste studied the board, not calculating 3 moves ahead, just enjoying the moment. The warm pressure of Emma's head against her shoulder while the girl read in her lap. Emma was reading a book about a girl who solved mysteries with her dog, and she had reached a part she did not understand, and she was not yet asking about it because she liked the not knowing. "Your move," Liam said, leaning back with the relaxed confidence of a man who had found his place. "If I make this move," Celeste said, indicating a knight that would fork his king and queen, a combination she had been laying for 10 moves, "and you respond the way I think you will, I might actually beat you for once." It was a running joke between them. Her perpetual quest to beat the man who had checkmated her in 3 moves on their first encounter. She had come close several times. She had secured a few draws, but his chess intuition was still razor-edged, hardwired by decades that no leave of absence could erase. "Might," Liam agreed, with the same smile that had skipped her heart on that first evening when he'd looked up from the reset board, "or I might surprise you." Emma looked up from her book with the serious expression she wore when she was about to deliver wisdom, the expression that always reminded Celeste of Liam's intensity, tempered by something gentler that must have come from Sarah. "Maybe you could both win. Maybe winning's not about the chess game at all." Celeste and Liam traded a look across the board. Both of them understood that their daughter, because that was what Emma had become. Formally, Celeste having begun step-parent adoption proceedings the previous month, and emotionally, long before that had once again identified the thing the adults had nearly missed. Celeste reached across the table and took Liam's hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of honest labor and the quiet strength that had carried all 3 of them through the hard months of becoming a family. "I think she's right. I think we both already won." In the jacket draped over his chair was a small velvet box he had bought the week before. He had not taken it out yet. There was no rush. They had time. The chess pieces sat forgotten as the 3 of them dissolved into laughter, the sound carrying across the small yard like a promise of all the games yet to be played, all the victories yet to be shared, all the love yet to be discovered in the simple act of choosing each other one move at a time. The afternoon light filtered through the maple they had planted together the spring before, dappling shadows across the table where the unfinished game waited patiently for them to come back. But for now, the real game, the one that mattered, had already been won. Not in the movement of carved pieces across a checkered board, but in the small, quiet rooms of an ordinary happiness that had become the only meaningful measure of their success. Some games you win in 3 moves. Others, you win by realizing you stopped keeping score.